and welcome to the Orange Mailbox. I'm your host, Logan, with my brother and co-host, Lamar.
Present.
And we are hunkered down in an undisclosed location in the studio today and trying to bring all you social distancers and fellow quarantiners some quality interviews and inspirational postcards and stuff to keep you occupied during this interesting time. So we have a special guest today, and she is originally from Fairmount, Indiana.
Home of James Dean, by the way.
Yes, and along with her husband, who is originally from Rockford, Illinois. Now, this is a really special interview for us today. They're all fun, but this is a special one for us today, not only because of her connection and their connection to the county, but because their connection to us. So we're excited to have my oldest daughter, Cassie, on with us today, along with her husband, my son-in-law, Garrett, and the parents of my beautiful grandbabies. And they are joining us today all the way from Ukraine. Nice to have you on today, guys.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Nice. So we're just going to get on into this, and hopefully we can learn a little bit about you, or the people will. We already know, but once you start off with give us a little bit of background. I know you, like I said, you're from Fairmount and from Illinois, and whoever wants to go first, this is our first video interview, so this is kind of unique for us too. So just kind of give us a short little background to give people a feel where you're from, that type thing.
Sure. Yeah. So I went to a few different schools in Marion before we landed in Fairmount, where I went through elementary school, junior high, and my freshman year of high school. And then we moved to North Carolina. But we got to come back in 2014, and Garrett and I actually got married in Grant County. So not only was I born there, but we got to be married there, and it always is a special place for us.
Not from Rockford, Illinois, the great state of debt and taxes. But what to say about Rockford? If you've never been, save yourself the trip.
That's the longest drive ever to Rockford.
Not as long as the drive is to Ukraine.
Well, true.
Yeah, I grew up in Rockford. It was in 2013 when I went to Montana to work with an organization, Youth with a Mission, and that's where I met Cassie. And it was love at second sight. Maybe not the first, but certainly the second.
Yeah, during that one, didn't you, brother?
Oh, for anyone who knows Cassie, yes, I
did. So you guys met in 2013, and you got married in what year?
2014.
2014.
Thank you for asking her that question.
Yeah, I saved you, brother. You can pay me later.
Yeah, I will.
And you got two babies, and they are?
Levi Leland is 2.5 years old, and Nora Elaine is 10 months old, and both were born in Boston, Massachusetts.
I miss them babies. So you guys, well, we're going to a little bit more background. You have some hobbies, I assume. Garrett is a studied disc golfer, and he's average.
Well, depends on who you ask. If you talk to my son Levi, I'm a pro.
Oh, okay.
If you talk to an actual pro, yeah, I'm probably below average.
And if you talk to Nora, you'll just get a blank stare.
Yeah. Smile.
And one thing that Garrett has learned, he has learned that and discovered who Bill Gaither is with this Fairmount connection, which is a good thing. And he also learned that James Dean and Jimmy Dean are two different people.
Yes, one was in the movies and one made sausage.
I thought we had landed on it was the same person.
Well, no, they're different.
All right, we're going to have to iron that out.
We went over that before the interview, man. Okay, so you guys met out in YWAM in 2013. Cassie, you had been out there how long prior to him coming out there?
I had been in Montana for 2.5 years before I met Garrett.
You just loaded up your little car, everything you had, and drove out there on your own.
from Madisonville, Kentucky. Sold everything I owned that didn't fit in my 2004 Chevy Aveo and drove across the country to northwest Montana on Flathead Lake.
Nice, beautiful out there. I never did get to go out there, and it's just. But anyways,
what were your guys' duties out there? What did you?
So when Garrett and I met, I was staffing a program called Discipleship Training School, which here on out will be called a DTS, but it is the entry-level training program to YWAM. I'd been staffing for a year and a half by the time he came, but I did my DTS in fall 2011. Went to India for 2 months, and then when I came back, I never left. I stayed on staff and continued to lead short-term teams overseas and discipleship groups in Montana.
So explain to people listening what YWAM is. Some of them have probably heard of it.
Sure.
Some of them are familiar with it like myself, but a lot of people don't know what YWAM is and what they do.
Yeah, understandable. I didn't know what YWAM was either. So I heard about it and I was like, how did I not know about this? So YWAM is a missionary training ministry that focuses especially with the age group 18 to 25-year-olds in training them to do missions both domestic and overseas internationally. The entry-level program that I talked about at DTS, and then from there are secondary programs and then third-tier programs because YWAM also has a university called University of the Nations. So you can actually earn associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and master's degrees through their university.
That's a reformed Air Force base out there, isn't it?
In Montana, yeah. So the interesting thing about YWAM also is that it's decentralized, and so we don't share leadership. Each YWAM base has its own leadership team. The only thing that connects us is 18 core values. So that's how there's consistency.
How many people do you think YWAM trains a year?
Ooh, internationally?
Yeah.
In the thousands easily.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Sending
We have
them
20,000 plus full-time volunteers in 180 countries.
That's huge. I didn't realize it was that big.
Because it's decentralized, though, you'll have some people that have had great experience with it and some people who have not. So sometimes it just depends on who you talk to. But if you've had a poor experience, talk to somebody who's had a good experience.
It's ministry, right? So it's people.
Yeah.
And people are messy and broken people. And so it's how you choose to view it, I guess.
Yeah, you're going to run into situations if you work with people.
Yeah.
What were your duties out there, Garrett?
So I primarily worked with the School of Biblical Studies. It was a 9-month program where you inductively walk through each book of the Bible. So by the end of this 9-month period, you've essentially written your own commentary on the entire Bible. And so the point is to get people in God's Word to see what it says, because I think there's a statistic that less than 10% believers have actually read their entire Bible in the West. And so, hey, if this is what we believe this is God's inspired word, then it's probably important to read it.
You had some background with the ministry with your parents and stuff, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. My dad is an international youth specialist is his title, but he just travels around and speaks professionally.
And if a lot of you haven't heard of him, his name is Greg Speck. I believe he has 2 or 3 books he's even written, right?
5 or 6.
Oh, 5
wow.
or 6.
Yeah, speaking of his books, one of them being Sex It's Worth Waiting For, which as a kid, I misread it as sex. It isn't worth waiting for.
Cassie, you mentioned India, and you were there for 2 months.
Yes.
I know you've been to several countries, but tell us a little bit about your time in India.
Sure. So when I went to India, I went as a student. All my other trips after that I was leading the team. But in India as a student, I was 25. We were a team of 13, and we had 2 16-year-old girls on that team because you can do a DTS as soon as you graduate high school. So we had two young homeschool girls. So India was wild. It's exactly what you think it would be, and then even more different. It was interesting. We traveled a lot. So we flew into Mumbai. And the interesting thing about Mumbai is like you see multiple centuries on one road. And what I mean by that is uh, you have 4 lanes of traffic. You see the newest Mercedes Benz, like
Mm-hmm.
pristine condition. And by the time you get to the 4th lane, there is a mule drawn cart, like with the agricultural workers bringing like food to sell on the street. So it was, I think for me up to that point, I hadn't seen such socioeconomic diversity in one place. Like to see that in the States, like, sure, you might see in Atlanta, New York, Chicago, but not to that degree. So I remember that just being shocking, as well as, the amount of people coming from Grand County. Like, it's an ag center, right? Like, not a ton of people.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
Indiana Wesleyan growing up wasn't that big. So there weren't a lot of college students around. So to be with millions of people in one small area was a bit of a shock to the system.
I bet.
And then, yeah, so, but ministry like was rich. We did so many different things. We did street evangelism. We worked in churches. I think the most memorable night of worship or ministry for me personally, was we did this open air, which is basically like street evangelism. So with a group, we like when you go, you prepare skits, you prepare dramas, you know that you're going to have to give your testimony, you know that you're going to be asked to preach at some point. So this particular night, it was my night to share my testimony. And so I was also a part of this drama that we were doing called Beautiful. And so we did this drama on the porch of a Hindu temple. And so all of these like Hindu believers from this village started coming out to watch and share. And our translator's name was Deepak. And so Deepak and I were on the Hindu porch, like the Hindu temple porch, after this drama, and like sharing my testimony, and the Holy Spirit just being so evident. It was almost like you could see the Holy Spirit like moving through the crowd, like through the people, and team members were praying with people. And I just remember that night for the first time feeling like not only was my testimony powerful, but like God could use like hard things. And I knew that night that I wanted to come back and lead other teams. I knew I wanted to be in ministry because I still was trying to figure out like what my future looked like. But that was a really powerful night for me to see the Holy Spirit move in such a real and tangible way.
It's just neat to think that here's this little girl from Fairmount, Indiana, and she's in India, and people are responding to things that she dealt with way over here, and you had no idea that. It's just neat how we can be used that way.
Yeah.
So you went from India, you went back to base, and then I believe your next endeavor was Cambodia.
It was, yes.
And was that, I don't believe that was with a full team, was I think that was
It was a smaller team because
Smaller
that
team.
DPS was a specific we had a backpackers. It was focused on outdoor ministry. So being in Montana, we pull a lot of outdoor wilderness people. So we focused on wilderness skills, backpacking trips in the wilderness, rock climbing, ropes courses. We focused more on that. And so we had a smaller school because those kinds of things are more expensive. So you can't have as many people.
and I still have some of them pictures of the kids over there. I believe one of the little girls drew a picture, and I still have that picture. It was just, I don't know, it was very neat. But that particular area, what was so particular about that area that you went to? What had happened there?
So a few things. Cambodia as a whole, most people are familiar with, well, or not familiar because it wasn't really spoken about, but the Khmer Rouge and genocide, where anyone who was educated, who even looked educated, like if you wore glasses, you were killed because the government was trying to overpower and take over, and they were successful. And so Cambodia, in that regard, really is a nation of young people. You don't see a lot of older Khmer people when you're there, because most of them were killed by their government. And so where we went, there's a YWAM base in Battambang, which is about 4.5 hours northwest of Phnom Penh, which is the capital. Then we went an additional 3 hours north to a province called Preah Vihear, which is just south of Thailand. And there is ministry there, but it's one guy. And so we really felt, as we prayed, to go and encourage him and work with him and partner with him. And so this particular area still had active landmines. So we were only allowed in certain places at certain times, because we didn't know where those would be found. But I think the highlight for me at that time was seeing how desperate the global church has to be on the same page of the gospel going forth and doing it together. Missions can't exist without the local church, and the local church needs missionaries. And so for that kind of partnership, to see this guy who'd been serving in Preah Vihear by himself for 15 years, and he just needed encouragement. He needed people to come and see what God was doing there. So
now what year was this that you went to Cambodia?
that was 2012.
12, and then you went back to base, working DTS, and then Mr. Garrett shows up.
He did.
Am I on the right timeline?
You are.
And then he was doing the regular studies while you were in DTS. Is that correct?
No, so that was after we actually went to Brazil together for his outreach for his school.
So you went to Brazil. That's where I was going to go next. So you guys went to Brazil together. And now, was this your first time leading a team in Brazil?
Me.
You.
No,
Yeah.
This was my second team.
Your second leadership opportunity. And then you and Garrett went to Brazil together, and that was, where was that at? In Brazil?
We were in Rio. Rio de Janeiro.
Even made a video or some TV deal down there, and he was on the beach.
I was on the national news twice in the 2 months we were there.
Now, there was an interesting story that I know we're going to get into some interesting stories, but you went to Brazil as co-leaders, correct?
No, he was my student.
Okay, Garrett was your student then.
I was a student, yeah.
Okay, and then from there you went to Haiti and Dominican Republic.
Just Cassie.
Yep, just me.
Just Cassie went that time.
Yeah, that's when he was doing his Bible school in Montana.
Okay. And
So the school I eventually staffed that I talked about, the School of Biblical Studies, I was participating in that course as a student while Cassie was in Haiti and Dominican.
Okay.
Before I joined staff.
Okay, and then you went from there, and now you're in Ukraine ministering together. And are you actually in Kyiv or just outside of Kyiv?
We are.
And it's pronounced
right
Kyiv, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well done.
I'm learning.
You could say Kiev, but that's the Russian pronunciation. Kyiv is the Ukrainian pronunciation.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's why you hear it and see it spelled two different ways.
Okay. And it's not the Ukraine, it's Ukraine.
Ukraine. It was the Ukraine when we were under Soviet rule.
Okay.
So they've been pushed back. Putin and his masses have been pushed back.
Well,
Not in the South.
not
Yeah.
Putin. That was in 91.
So they're still connected to Russia in some way?
No, Russia, depending on how up to date you are with current events, Russia took a part of Ukraine and is currently still actively trying to take other parts of Ukraine. So we're
Okay.
actually in an active conflict zone, but it's in the east. We're in central Ukraine.
Okay. So back to your missionary trips, we talked about what you was trying to do in India and in Cambodia. And what was your goal when you went to Brazil?
To survive.
To woo Cassie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was your missionary trip.
Okay.
I know that you ran into a very interesting situation when you was in Brazil. Tell us about that.
Cassie.
Oh, Which interesting situation? There were a few.
I am signaling to you what he's talking about.
I'm thinking about
Gun.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm thinking about the being protected by that drug dealer. What was your basic mission when you went to Brazil?
Okay. All right. Well, our hope is always to bring the gospel, right? That's
Yes.
our hope as believers is that people would encounter the living God. And so we went to Brazil, but the difference with Brazil is Brazil's a Christian nation already. And so we went to evangelize, but we also went to encourage believers.
And I was there to woo Cassie.
And you were there to woo Cassie, and that seemed your missionary trip was a success.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Now, you did run into an interesting situation when you were in Brazil. Tell us about that.
So we, for part of our stay, we lived in a favela or a slum in Rio de Janeiro. And what was unique about this slum is you have two types. Some slums are owned by the government, and some are controlled by drug lords. And so we were actually staying in one controlled by a drug lord. And the reason we were allowed to even come in to the slum, because as you're entering it, you see guys with AK-47s,
loaded,
standing guard. So we always had to be with a Brazilian going in and out.
Did you think you made a wrong turn and went down the wrong street?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. But we were able to come in because this drug lord had been a pastor in his past. And so now he was living this life as a drug lord, and he thought if he allowed missionaries to come into his slum, that God would bless him, or at least would hold back his wrath because of what he was doing as a drug lord. Very interesting.
So he was protecting you then?
Yep.
Wow.
He thought that would justify his spreading drugs across the world.
Right.
But he had enough fear of God that he didn't let anybody mess with you. Interesting.
Oh yeah, and you would walk through,
but not enough to change his life.
You would walk through this favela, and there were like Bible verses like painted on the walls, like down these narrow walks, and you're like, what are we even doing here? Like, how did we get here?
Wow.
And here's the thing about Brazil. Okay, I'm this Midwest boy, and it's around maybe 11 o'clock, and for me that's late. But as we're heading back to the church we're staying at, you see the community setting up these huge speakers because they're about to start partying. Brazil is such a warm culture. They start partying and they go till 3 or 4 in the morning.
Not even partying, like that's their social time.
Sure, social time. Yeah.
Now you guys ran into some interesting things also, or Cassie did in Haiti, which caused a sickness and ran in. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the last DTS team that I led overseas was a big team because we had 3 leaders. I was training 2 new staff how to lead outreach. And so we had 3 leaders. We had 14 students, which is a very big team for a DTS outreach. The plan was to spend a month in the Dominican and a month in Haiti. That's the way visas worked, and it just worked out with the YWAM ministries that needed help. So we were in the Dominican for 2 weeks. We were going to be in Haiti for a month and then back to the Dominican for 2 weeks. So our first 2 weeks in the Dominican, we head into Haiti a little after New Year's, and we drive. So you can drive because it's the same island. So we drive into Haiti and then keep driving another 2.5 hours into a desert. And like away from the coast. So we're going inland away from the coast. And that was it. Like the van dropped us off and left. So there was 17 people who were not Haitian in this Haitian village. And so the pastor we worked with was phenomenal. I've never seen a pastor love and shepherd their flock so well. Pastor Bo, he just loved his people so well. He moved his family out there. They didn't have money to build a home, so he and his wife and daughter lived in a tent in the middle of a desert in Haiti. Like, he was just completely committed to the vision for this place. And so we were there, and we were playing in the river with kids one day, and it's where they do their laundry. It's where they slaughter their animals to eat. It's where they wash their dishes. And so we didn't think anything of it, water. And so we found out after half of our team came down with a mysterious illness that they had been pumping the river water into the water tank, and we didn't know it. So we had been introduced to dirty water. So myself and 5 students ended up going to an wasn't even an emergency room. We were treated in a triage clinic for a hospital in St. Mark, which is the capital. And sorry, St. Mark is not the capital, but that was the nearest village we were in. So we go, and it's Western doctors that don't know how to treat tropical diseases. And so they spoke English, but they couldn't diagnose us because they didn't know what our symptoms were. And so get better, go back to the village. And then I get sick 2 days later and slowly start to lose consciousness. So one of my guy co-leaders, and we actually had, praise God, we had a former LPN on our team. So the 3 of us got in a truck, and they drove me to the same hospital in St. Mark, and they could not figure out what was wrong with me. So I was in and out of consciousness. I was losing weight really quickly. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. So they kept running tests. And after 3 days of that, they realized that I had amoebic dysentery, and they didn't know how to treat it. And so they gave me some medicine, sent me back to the village. And then we realized at that point, we need to get the students who are sick out back to the Dominican, where we can get healthcare and treatment that will actually help, because no one was getting better. And we needed to protect our students and keep them from the ones who weren't sick from getting sick. So myself and a co-leader, and then the students who had been sick, got in a van, and we drove back to the Dominican. And as soon as we crossed the Dominican border, I went unconscious again. And what had happened was the medicine that they gave me, 1, I was allergic to, and 2, they had given me so much medicine that it shut down my system. And I couldn't keep consciousness. And so I got admitted to the hospital in the Dominican and spent 4 or 5 days there while they tried to get my system rebooted and back working again. And they didn't know at that point that I was allergic to the medicine that they had given me in Haiti. And so they were giving me the same medicine. And so the same thing just kept happening. So eventually I got discharged and got to go back. I had dropped 15 pounds, and
heck of a diet.
Yeah, my kidneys were shot. My liver was shot. Once we got back to the state, so I stayed on outreach. I stayed on the field with my team until we got back. And then once we got back, I had to go have my kidneys and my liver checked every 2 weeks for 6 months. And then after that, every 6 months.
Wow.
And so actually the morning of our wedding. So we got married 4 months after this. And the morning of our wedding, I woke up and was having a reaction to the antibiotics I was still on, and had a black tongue from my medicine. It's I can't get married like this, but it ended up going away and it was fine. But it took a while for my body to fully recover from dysentery.
I remember that was scary times.
Yeah.
I'd just like to mention that during this time, I am back in Montana studying the Bible, as a student in the school, and I get an email from Cassie, "Hey, just letting you know I'm a little sick." I respond, "Oh, sorry, hon, I hope you feel better." Little did I know she was at death's door.
Yeah. Yeah, she covered a lot of that over. We didn't get all that info either, so.
I didn't want people to worry. There's nothing anyone could have done, so I didn't want people to get...
I'd just like to say our communication in marriage has gotten better.
Well, that's good. So was this, was the water sabotaged from didn't you run into some voodoo over there or something?
Yeah. depending on beliefs, some people think that, so the day before I got sick on a Friday, and that Thursday afternoon, I was like, why is no one preaching the gospel to the witch doctor? Like, I don't understand. There was a male witch doctor and a female witch doctor. And basically, when we went to the hut of the male witch doctor, he was like, oh, and this is through translation. He basically says, like, oh, like, I've seen Jesus. I know he's real, but I can't tell people that because then I won't have enough money to feed my family. And so I'll confess that I believe in Jesus before I die, because the way he was making money was through being a voodoo priest, basically.
Wow.
So I preached the gospel anyways and was like, this is who Jesus is. He died on the cross. Like, give your life to him. We have this. And then the next day is when I wake up sick.
Scary. So, Garrett, I'm sure you have some funny stories, or both of you have maybe some funny things that have happened along the way in your adventures.
Oh boy.
Or not.
What, during our time in YWAM or in marriage?
Well, they're both adventures. No, in your in
Could you repeat the question?
Thank you.
you had some. I'm sure you've. Is there any particular funny story that you remember on your missionary trips that you want to tell us?
Oh boy.
So I have one, and mine is from Cambodia, and it's a two-part story. The first part is I am petrified of giant rodents of the rat persuasion. Terrifying. Don't know why, but I just think they're the scariest things in the world. And so we're living in like this glorified treehouse in Cambodia in the village, and we get there and there's not enough beds, like the girls. So there were 4 girls, a married couple, and then 6 guys. So the 4 girls got a bed, the married couple got a room, and all the guys were sleeping on their mats downstairs on the first floor. But that left me as the only other single girl. And so I like set up shop in the living room upstairs. So I lay out my mat and I'm laying on the wooden floor, and I hear this like, and I'm like, no, Jesus, why? So I turn my lantern on, and there's this rat mouse just scurrying across. And I was like, Josh, which is the husband. And he comes out and he was like, I thought I only had to do this for Kara. Kara ended up being my matron of honor in our wedding. So missions really bond people together. But so Josh comes out and scares the rodent away, but I didn't sleep a wink that night. So the next day, another girl and I get on our bicycle and we're pedaling through the Khmer village, 2 white girls on this bike, to try and find a hammock for me to sleep in for the next 6 weeks. So here we are, just loving our life, riding this bicycle. It's got like a seat on the back for groceries that I'm riding on, so we look ridiculous. So we're going through the village, and everyone just is like pointing and laughing at us as we go by, because that's what like the little schoolgirls did. We're like, surely we can do it too, but we became well known for our bike shenanigans because it just got us to the market faster.
So you guys went back to base, and then you felt a need to further your studies, and you moved to Boston.
Yeah, the idea was, hey, this is what we feel like God has called us to vocationally. So why don't we get further training so that we can be better equipped to help equip others? And I got to tell you, the best story from that time for me was Cassie and I are filling out our applications for Gordon Conwell, and the application fee is $100. So we both owe $100. Unfortunately, we didn't even have $200 in our account. Long story short, the night before, Cassie had made some clerical error and given away all our money. Another time. So we didn't even have $200. So we prayed about it. Just asked God, like, hey, Lord, this is a situation, we had this need. And this is on a Thursday night. Friday goes by. We don't tell anyone about this. And then Saturday morning, 7 a.m., somebody knocks on our door. And it was actually somebody visiting the base. It wasn't somebody who's living there. This is the YWAM base. But she says, hey, I just felt like God wanted me to give you guys this. And it was a check for $200.
Wow.
And that right there, we both just felt our faith grow, but just affirmed in where we felt God was calling us.
Yeah.
Makes you want to fall on your face.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It did.
Absolutely.
You guys could tell us stories all day about how the Lord has supplied for you and opening your door and there's money outside your door. You don't even know who left it.
In a Ziploc bag.
Yes. Tell us that story real fast.
So when I got saved and came into missions, I had one friend who was a believer. And so when it came to raising support, I'd been working at a church in Kentucky, but I didn't have a ton of support. So I lived on $250 a month, and $200 of that went towards my rent. So this month came and I was like, what am I going to do? I don't have rent. I was talking to my roommates. They were going to split it until I could find the money to help pay. And I wake up one morning and my roommate Sarah was like, Cassie, come here. And I go out and someone had written like for Cassie, and it was $200 cash in a Ziploc bag on the steps of our house. Like, that is insane. Wow. And that wasn't the only time that happened. Things just showed up like that all the time.
Just right when you need it to, not too early or too late.
Just in the perfect moment.
Just right on time.
That's the beauty of being poor missionaries is you get to see God be faithful to his promises of providing for needs.
Yeah.
You know, not that he's going to make us rich, wealthy, but he's going to provide for those needs. Yeah. And we've seen that again and again.
Yes, that's exciting.